How's it going, guys? I'm back with part 5 in my read-through of The Secret Man by Frank Dux, and I want to say thank you to everyone who has been sending me support for doing this read-through series of this book. It really means a lot to me. I hope you guys like the Frank Dux meme I made. It's not one of my best memes, I know, but I thought it was okay. I'm not gonna lie, doing this read-through series so far, it's been pretty interesting. Just reading some of the tall tales made up by crazy bipolar Grandpa Frank that he made up in this book. It's like, how can anyone believe this? It's like, you'd have to be a special kind of stupid to believe any of the tall tales told by Frank. I'm talking Darwin Award stupid. Anyways, let's go ahead and continue on and read Chapter 5, Identities. The best entertainment at the 1993 Spec War Specialist Conference in San Diego, honoring the 50th anniversary of Navy SEALs, was watching Keith Adema's face. What the hell, Frank? Do you know everyone here? Keith Adema, a former Green Beret and reputed mercenary, looked up at me, his mouth gaping wider as the list of bigwigs increased. I had just bumped into a quizzical Rear Admiral George Worthington, the retired ex-head of the Navy SEALs. Gorgeous George was balding with a slight lisp, but he knew his stuff. And as far as my experience went, he was a straight shooter. Now he looked like a leaner, handsomer, and more polished version of Terry Bradshaw. He turned over in his hands the prized Mamba knife he had just purchased. As he stared, he recognized me, but couldn't quite jog his memory. "Don't I know you?" He finally asked, giving up. "Maybe," I replied. I wasn't offering any information, though. Watching him squirm and struggle was too much fun. Okay, it took him a minute or two. By the time I was headed toward a booth sporting the latest thermal scopes, I wanted to try out some night vision goggles and see if there'd been any improvements over the half-assed junk we'd been stuck with in the past. Okay, how are you going to test out night vision goggles in a room with lighting in it? I don't know here. "Blackjack," the Admiral shouted out after me. His memory suddenly jogged. At the thermoscopes, which did show considerable improvement over the past versions, I ran into Hal. I'll leave a caption, I can't pronounce this dude's last name. The 6'4" brown bear. Hal and I had both operated in Thailand in the past. Since then, he had worked for the CIA, been a SEAL, and done a stint as bodyguard for Steven Seagal. Now he was involved with international projects. The list of people who recognized me and the laughs went on. Army Major General John K. Singh. I'll leave a caption, I can't pronounce his last name here. A former member of the OSS, a number of ex-spooks, and Admiral Smith, a Gulf War commander, and the current big chief of the SEALs. The last time we had crossed paths was in Saudi Arabia when we delivered intelligence assist needed for General Norman. I'll leave another caption, I can't pronounce this dude's last name either. Implementation of a plan to disguise U.S. helicopters as Iraqi chapters to penetrate Iraqi airspace. I checked out some joystick video exhibits by Lytton, or I'll leave a caption just in case I'll probably say it wrong, and then headed toward the diving gear. Near the tanks, I ran into Tony the Tiger. Okay, you ran into the dude from the Kellogg's Frosted Flakes cereal box now? Are you that far out of it, Frank, that you're now having imaginary friends like Tony the Tiger? What the hell? Okay, an old friend and former member of the ultra secret elite unit, now dubbed Nest. We had mutual enemies in Panama where he had been shot and wounded after recovering due to circumstances and the fecal nature of the business. He ran a brothel in Milwaukee for a while. Now he was a vice president for a Midwest defense-related manufacturer and personally responsible for making sure I was in addition at the private SEAL UDT underwater demolitions team reunion party that night. The conference of my the confession of my identity was magnified. Oh, confusion. Sorry, I get words mixed up here. The confusion of my identity was magnified because in the past I had often used doubles. The employment of doubles, however, creates an invisible box meant not only to protect but also to contain covert operatives. It made outside verification of operations and participants almost impossible. One cannot imagine the sad but sometimes humorous confusion that can result from using doubles. One such incident involved Priscilla McDonald of Canon Pictures. During a Showtime promo interview for the movie Bloodsport, the Canon feature film based on my experiences in the Kumite Championship, it took the reassuring presence of Jean-Claude Van Damme to convince Miss McDonald of something as simple as my identity. At an earlier instance, she had interviewed my double while I was clandestinely abroad. Are you kidding me, Frank? Oh my god, seriously. He had alienated her to mask his true identity and to prevent my possible exposure. Oh my god. Oh, this is what I'm talking about. Why you had to be Darwin Award stupid to believe any of this bullshit right now. Even my military records indicate conflicting identifications. One one entry list of my military occupational specialty as a communicator, but notes no military communication school attended. According to another account, I am an intelligence specialist, but documents fail to mention fail to mention any intelligence training school. And what about my record as a Marine? As a Marine Corps reserve, uh, I'll leave a caption. I can't pronounce that word. Unconventionally serving the required 130 days active duty as a recruiter. Many memories, good and bad, returned as Keith and I encountered various faces from the past. The Expo team, Tim, I'll leave a caption, I can't read that word, with petty officers, sheep dippers, members of members and ex-members of Delta Force, the Navy anti-terrorist units, and DEV Group, the new name for SEAL Team 6, FBI agents, officials from the Customs Department, and various soldiers of fortune type. As fate would have it, however, no one had been verified or briefed that civilians would be in attendance, although such notification is standard operating procedure. The Top Gun movie, I'll leave a caption, I can't read that word, Jerry Bruckheimer himself, along with Lucas Foster, then head of development for Simpson Bruckheimer, and later studio executive production for Turner Films, and hotshot film writer John Bishop, whose screenplays include The Package and had been given last-minute security clearance to gather information for upcoming film projects, including Crimson Tide and Rogue Warrior. As I learned from Bloodsport, the movie business can be almost as demanding, detailed, and cutthroat as politics or intelligence work, and these guys weren't missing a thing, including me. A few years earlier, I would have ignored their encouragement to talk. Revealing my history would have seemed unpatriotic, cowardly, and foolhardy. The intelligence community thrives on secrecy and deception, and I believed that clandestine operations were absolutely necessary to protect the national interest, since the CIA was forbidden by Congress to direct or carry out domestic operations. I was convinced of the necessity of the soldiers of the twilight, independents such as myself, and blind to the ultimate consequences, personally and publicly. However, my views had changed. Some things, however, never changed. Pirate, a voice rang out. It was my turn to be surprised. That short, weary guy moved quickly, particularly since he limped and carried a cane. Bucky, I exclaimed in delight as he wrapped me in an enthusiastic hug that took the breath out of me. Bucky and I had had a number of adventures together, including special duties in Central America. We'd survived. I'll leave captions for these two places I can pronounce these words, and contras, not to mention the, I'll leave another caption, I can't read that word either, of our own side, whoever that might have been. Sometimes we weren't sure. In fact, we'd nearly died together so many times that we often joke that if one of us ever hit the dirt, the other would go at the same time. I was glad to see that Bucky had survived and hadn't lost any of his unique charm. If I know you, that cane's not just a cane, I commented. I was right. It turned out to mask a blade and spring lock that, once released, turned its silver head into something close to a medieval mace. Bucky's grin let me know I was right on target. You know me, pirate. I like the satisfaction of a personal effort more than some impersonal explosives. Keith joined us, shaking his head in amazement. You worked with Frank too? Frank? Bucky didn't know me by that name. Keith gestured at me. Frank Dux, this sorry son of a bitch. Bucky's mouth almost hit the floor. You're Frank Dux? The Frank Dux? Oh, God, don't tell me Frank's going to start ego stroking again. The one Van Damme tried to impersonate in Bloodsport? I'll be damned. Okay, the conference was getting more entertaining by the minute. I'd never seen Bucky at a loss for words before, and here I was dumbstruck and shaking his head in here he was dumbstruck and shaking his head in amazement. Better be careful, Bucky, you old fart, I taunted. You're getting rusty. A player's got to be able to handle surprises without giving himself away. Your words, if I remember correctly. Damn you, pirate, he grins, his crazy grin. Remember that beach party at, I'll leave a caption, I can't read this place here, where you nearly got us killed by acting like an idiot? Somehow, I believe this. Frank acting like an idiot is not that hard to believe. Okay, you guys were at, once again leave a caption, Adema chimed in, Nigeria? Hell yes, Bucky answered, but you had to be there on the beach to really appreciate it, unlike Pirate here, who's always too busy to savor the moment. Adema shook his head in amazement. I should have known. I'm glad you took the advice I gave you in Nigeria, Bucky said to me, suddenly serious. Advice? About getting out, I mean. This is fun. He swept his arm across the stage of special warfare types and officers and displays of new hardware, like a big high school reunion, but I'm glad we're not in this bullshit anymore. It's enough to make you really crazy. He turned and smiled as if to let me know that he still really was crazy, and some of the old Bucky still survived. You know, pirate, we were a couple of dumb fucks down in Nigeria. We're lucky to be alive, and just think, if we'd died down there, I never would have learned who you really are. He gave a whoop. I feel like someone just pulled the mask off the Lone Ranger. Even though we often went years without seeing each other, Bucky always had a way of making me really think about my life, my direction, why I was doing what I was doing at the time. I was glad that Bucky had been enlightened concerning my identity, but I wish that he could have clued me in. The way I felt, I didn't know who in the hell I was, and the many names and identities that had provided such amusement at the Spec War conference only in, accentuated in the end the fact that I wasn't sure who the hell I really was. I was a great impersonator, but who was beneath the impersonations? Even Bloodsport, my story starred someone else posing as me. Who the hell are you? Lucas Foster asked me, the executive producer of Crimson Tide, Bad Boys, and Dangerous Minds. He had stumbled in on the last part of our conversation. He spoke in jest, but also with a bit of true wonder, just as friends, lovers, and my wives had asked me in the past, "Who do you think I am?" I usually replied, "I'm me." But was that? Who was that? Like Lewis Carroll's Alice, I hadn't taken on. Okay, I had taken on so many identities that I wasn't quite sure. My world was every bit as bizarre as Alice's. The main difference was that the world in which I moved and changed identities was a hell of a lot more dangerous than Wonderland. In my work, if someone whispered off with his head, it often happened. Maybe I could blame my identity crisis on my family. After all, we'd been in the spy business in some form or another for 3 generations. When it came down to it, 2 strange and unrelated centerpieces appeared at the heart of my identity: Passover and espionage. Passover signified my Jewish inheritance. In my work as a spy, I remained well aware that any particular moment was dependent on the past. My family, even those I had never known, had made decisions that had later determined my own fate. My family's idealistic inheritance created the qualities that ultimately made me unable to function as an operative, and in retrospect enabled me to maintain my integrity. My grandfather was a spy, and he certainly celebrated Passover. William was drafted into the Australian Intelligence Corps, adding the trucks at... Oh God, I'll leave a caption, I can't read that word. He crossed the no man's land, separating Turkish and... I'll leave a caption, I can't read that word, forces numerous times, impersonating a British lieutenant, and I'll leave a caption, I can't read that word, mingling with his enemies, identifying high-ranking enemy officers and their habitual locations. William terrorized their command. Okay, General Birdwood narrowly escaped with a bloody scalp wound, and the next day General Bridges, the no-nonsense commander of the Australian Division, was shot to death while inspecting parapets. I'll leave a caption. I can't read that word. God damn it! Another word I can't read. I'll just leave a caption for these two. Okay. 2 days later, Grandpa's next victim was Bridges General Staff Officer Major Willers Strutt, or whatever, an intelligence officer, followed by Birdwood's. I'll leave a caption. I can't read that word. Camp Lieutenant B.W. Onslow, or whatever. Okay, I carried on a tradition instilled by my grandfather, but my conscious connection to Passover and the realm of espionage occurred through my father, Alfred Dux. Okay. Today, my father battles old age and sin. I'll leave a caption, can't read that word. But I still remember him as a quiet, solid man, shouldering the heavy doors as he delivered day after day, my own expensive shoulder span was carved from his barrel chest and stocky 5'5" frame. I never heard him complain or whine about any of the multitude of disappointments he had experienced. The long hours he worked, often holding down several jobs to make sure we had food, a roof, and the medical care my mother and I always seemed to need, left us little time spent to spend together, and even less for me to discover the details of his past, which gained in mystery due to his silence. For indeed, my father possessed a past radically different from his unremarkable present. Okay. Shortly before his 13th birthday, my father and grandfather were arrested as part of a campaign to intimidate Jews. Alfred's Jewish identity had not manifested itself in his appearance. A local sports hero, he appeared the ideal Aryan child with blue eyes and light hair and a voice that had almost landed him in the Vienna Boys Corps. Years later, he would still vividly recall the Australian officer accusing his father of having stolen him as an infant. The older man had remained deadly silent. I'll leave a caption, can't read that word. Their interrogator, little more than a glorified village bully, became unintimidated, perhaps as much to send away a potential witness to the officer's frustration and humiliation as anything else. Alfred was released, but William remained in prison. With the aid of the Jewish agency, my Aunt Stella smuggled herself and my father into Palestine, then under British control, in response to his own experiences, as well as his perception of the British as well as armed oppressors. My father entered the residence and soon became a member of the Jewish underground, dedicated to aiding Jews escaping persecution in Europe, as well as the challenging British leave a caption, I can't read that word, of Jerusalem. Okay, by the time he turned 14, Alfred had developed an unusual skill. He could liberate anything with four wheels and an engine and drive recklessly with uncanny precision. His legendary reputation includes hijacking a bus and managing to outdrive British policemen in pursuit. Oh shit. Okay, the bus was Dad's idea of how to transport groups of illegal, newly arrived Jews at night without suspicion. Later, the police started shooting at him. He stole police vehicles, mostly jeeps, for the. I'll leave a caption. I can't read that word. And another word I can't read for another caption there. Okay, the secret intelligence of the illegal Jews. Okay, the secret intelligence of the illegal Jews defense forces. These stolen official vehicles served numerous purposes. One involved a ruse whereby Jews disguised themselves as British policemen responding to ships smuggling refugees into Palestine. These police impersonators then aided the refugees rather than preventing their arrival. In 1939, Alfred Dux did an about-face and joined the British Army, becoming a member of the Jewish Brigade. Governments and nations changed, but to Alfred, justice and the right course of action did not. Allegiances to groups or countries were not of ultimate importance. In the end, following the path of moral integrity provided his primary motivation for loyalty. Throughout World War II, my father distinguished himself on numerous occasions. Okay, and his previous underground experience made him extremely valuable for certain missions, although due to his past, the British limited his direct participation in intelligence work, often using him as an instructor in the art of precaution I'll leave a caption. I can't read that word. Driving. He never had the luxury of all the high-tech equipment available at the Spec War exhibition. He made do with whatever happened to be on hand, and as a result was not dependent on technology. He instead relied upon his own ingenuity, which was considerably even so which was considerable. Even so, he became a thorn in the side of the British. In 1942, he was nearly apprehended in North Africa as a part of a group attempting to enlist the IRA in efforts to smuggle arms and I'll leave a caption, can't read that word, into Palestine. The year 1944 found my father back in Australia as a clandestine member of the Avengers. Now he was a member of a fucking comic book group? God damn it, Frank. A group composed of members of the Jewish Brigade operating in paramilitary fashion and wreaking vengeance upon those who had destroyed their homes and families. One tale related to me by a former friend of my father involves their return to, I'll leave a caption, I can't read this place, their hometown. A strange family occupied his childhood home on top of the family bakery. Alfred marched to the nearby I'll leave a caption, can't read that word. Responsible for the deportation of his family, but the officials in charge refused to answer his questions. When my father became increasingly enraged, the local authorities appealed to the British commander in charge of the town's occupation. My father retreated from the confrontation only to return later with a tank which he drove into the front wall of the station. A panic-stricken Australian policeman revealed to Alfred that his father, mother, and their two remaining children, too young for the dangerous passage of Palestine, had been sent to the death camps. With the end of the war, Alfred Dux returned to Israel in 1945 and became instrumental in smuggling Jews out of internment camps on Crete and delivering them to the White and Sand beaches, neighboring. I'll leave a caption. I can't read this place here. The British loathed him because of his commands and the English language, because of his command of the English language, his, and I'll leave it attitude. I can't read that word. Attitude and his familiarity with their standard operating procedures, and because, damn it, he didn't look like a bloody Jew. That's what one British officer shouted in frustration after my father had stolen a British truck loaded with guns. With their forced withdrawal from Palestine by the United Nations, the British stepped up efforts to disarm Jewish settlers and begin rearming the, I'll leave a caption, I can't read that word, in hopes of a Jewish slaughter and an excuse for a British return. However, Alfred and his, I'll leave a caption, can't read that word, commanders relied on the very tactics they had learned from the British. They fixed motors to make a tremendous explosion. Complete with lightning flashes. They convinced many, I'll leave a caption, can't read that word. They possessed an automatic bomb. They tied metal chains to the backs of their flimsy jeeps and drove in circles, cutting their light when going up hills and using them as they descended the same hill, providing the illusion of a heavily forfeited force to the enemies, and in the distance, thousands of refugees unable to communicate because of their multinational origins, nonetheless attacked heavily forfeited positions, armed with nothing but painted broomsticks. In 1947, during Israel's War of Independence, my father distinguished himself further by volunteering to drive medical supplies to Jerusalem. Once again, he found himself on the treacherous, winding road he had known so well, but this time he was behind the wheel of an antiquated truck and running a gauntlet of Arab snipers and mines. Often in wrestling with my own sense of identity, I would inexplicably find myself searching for pieces of my father and grandfather's past, as if they could provide me with a sense of who I was, I remember myself, or I remind myself that I am the third known generation involved in espionage and special warfare, and that my blood, I'll leave a caption. I can't. Oh, my blood stirred. I was gonna leave a caption, but now no. My blood stirred. Yeah, my blood stirred by childhood dreams of one day entering that mysterious world. What I did not understand then was that all things are two-sided, and to realize such a dream also opens the floodgates for nightmares, vicious victims, the horrors of the concent- concentration camps, and the long lenity of human suffering one must confront in added measure if one commits to making the dream a reality. Sometimes I wonder, though, whether I really had any choice. While I was searching for details of my father's past information, he had stayed fast. Okay, he had stayed fastly and I'll leave a caption. I can't read that word. Refused to reveal my personal or me or reveal me personally. A British intelligence officer informed me in conference that my father's past service to British intelligence remains invaluable, yet also embarrassing. His maverick attitude and divided loyalties led to his immigration to Canada. I moved strongly suggested by the British. My father and my father and in his father before him, I recognized my worth and my vulnerabilities. In times of crisis, they act to the best of their abilities, and although they are associated with a profession many consider this. I don't want to leave a caption, can't read that word. I consider them righteous men, men willing to take responsibility for their actions, men worth emulating. They wrestled with choices instead of acting in blind obedience, a blessing and a curse for a covert op. Even today, the burned out wreckage of vehicles that dared and lost in 1947 rust beside the Jerusalem road, silent reminders of a past often unknown or forgotten. Just like Alfred Dux himself, today my father is closer to one of those abandoned wrecks than the young man he was who so skillfully plotted piloted vehicles at such risk. However, looking back, I shudder to think how things might be if those vehicles had never pled plied fuck, I'll leave a caption, can't read that word. That road with such commitment and success. Perhaps in retrospect that's also enough of a reason for some of the wrecks I've left behind. And that's it for chapter 5. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this read through. Till next time, later.